Hey, welcome back. Today we are discussing the 4 or 5 basic things that students have the hardest time understanding and or implementing into their playing, or flat out just listening to and doing because they're paying you to teach them something they wanted to learn. As we have discussed in many previous episodes, students don't normally, in most of the cases, take your practicing advice. It's irritating as hell. Just get used to it. It's not that they disrespect you or anything. It's just how it is. Especially, again, we're dealing with kids who don't listen that well. But it's frustrating because you're going to hear, this works better for me, or this is easier for me, even though you'll tell them it's not the recommended or proper way to do it. You spend a lot of time fixing their mistakes. And these are the first few things that come to mind that are the most difficult to get them to just do consistently or to even do as they're directed. So the first thing, and I think it's the most common, but they're all about on the same even playing field, is alternate picking. Almost every student wants to downpick every single note, even though you have the pick directions clearly outlined on the page. 9 times out of 10, doesn't matter. They will still, even if you're playing, let's say you're playing Wasted Years by Iron Maiden. That's all alternate picking except for the first note in every little phrase there. You start with the downstroke, but students will try to down. You can't physically do that. Unless maybe James Hetfield can, but I know damn well it's a bitch for me. So it doesn't matter how thoroughly you write out the picking directions or how specific you make it, they're almost always going to forget because they're more focused on like where to put their hands. And just getting their pick hand to do what it's supposed to is a real difficult thing just for them to implement that at all, no matter how specific you make it. So here's a couple of ways to try to get them to do it. And if anyone has any suggestions, then by all means, please leave a comment below. So they will do it when you tell them to do it. You have to be, just like every other thing, you have to be constructive and be cool about it. Don't say, alternate pick that, damn it. If it's an adult student, because I've had students I could be that direct with, very rarely, but it's fun because you actually get to take your frustrations from all the other students out on them, and it's great because there's no repercussions then. Like I had one student who was all kinds of fun, Dave rocks. I still stay in touch with him. And he would give me some shit about fretting a D chord or whatever it was. And I'm like, damn it, Dave, just fucking do it this way. You've been a student this long. You know the drill by now. When you're talking about alternate picking, there's only a couple of ways that I've noticed even slightly make an impact as far as them implementing it to where they even do it somewhat regularly. And that's, first thing is not even focusing on their fret hand. Because most of the time they're worried about where this hand goes. They forget about how important the pick hand is. And so the only thing I've ever been able to do to get them to even close to get this to where they focus on it, and I have to do the same thing when I practice my picking, is you focus on the hand that's doing the playing. So if you're focusing on this hand where the finger placement goes for chords or whatever it is, then you focus on this hand. But since the pick hand's doing the job, I force them to look at their pick hand. And what they almost always do is they go back to looking at this hand. It's like, no, look at your hand and force it to go down, up, down, up, down, up. However long they need to do that for. And just starting them off with like the chromatic exercise. Quasi-chromatics. That's a good one because you have to alternate pick it to get it to be smooth. That's something everybody learns right at first. The only other thing I've noticed that seems to help is literally having them do the same thing, look at their pick hand while they're doing it, but also say the pick directions out loud. It's like when I have students count rhythms, I have them count it out loud because counting it in their head makes it harder for it to register. When they can actually hear that, it makes it to where it's like the system absorbs it better for whatever reason. It just seems to be helpful. Like if myself, as long as I've been playing, if I'm working on a new rhythmic value or concept, it actually helps for me to tap my foot, feel it, and then count the rhythm out loud. But with this case, it's just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And those are the only two ways I've ever been able to determine that they actually work, or they get the student in a better spot to get that to where it's a habit in their playing, where they do it consistently. Especially the kids who want to learn, the students period, who want to learn the faster stuff like the metal or the hard rock, but even anything to do with, like, if you're just playing strumming chords, like, you know, a lot of acoustic songs, playing open chords, you have to strum and you can't downpick everything, but you have to be on them all the time about that. It's just, I do not understand why down up is such a difficult concept, but they almost never do it consistently. So, and this is generally speaking, you have students who will, but it's very, very, very common to have this dilemma. So the next thing that's difficult for students to implement into their playing is they do this. Now, if you're moving positions like that, it's not so bad, because when you're shifting positions, depending on where you end up at, of course you're going to use one finger, usually the index. But if you're playing a scale pattern or something, then, you know, like that A minor pentatonic pattern at the 5th fret, then you're using 3 fingers, the index, pinky, and the ring. But they'll do this. They won't even they won't alternate pick like I did. They'll down pick it and use one finger for everything. So getting them to understand that to get from 5 to 8, you have a pinky, you have 3 other fingers you can use. That's like the most, besides the alternate picking, that's, I think, the second most difficult thing to get them to just make a habit of some sort. Here's another thing that they do with that, as far as the positioning. If they need to do from, say, fret 5 to 6, whether it's a trill they pick, they tend to use this finger on the next fret instead of this one. And you'll have to tell them, no, use the middle finger. And then sometimes they don't even know which one the middle finger is. If you're an American and you've driven on any highway in this country, you should automatically know which one it is. If I have to explain that any further, seek help. So, but it's just, I don't get it. So you have to tell them first finger, second finger. I have to pointer finger, index finger. Sometimes they still don't understand that. So I have to tell them your first finger. But, you know, as long as they understand what you're telling them is the important thing. Make it to where they can understand it. Every student's different. You're going to have to go about it several different ways depending on the student's age, skill level, etc. That's one thing that makes you a valuable teacher, is that you're able to describe the same exact thing to a bunch of different age groups and a bunch of different skill levels, and convey the same idea in a bunch of different ways, where every person you tell it to is able to understand, interpret, and implement it into their playing. So that's the second thing, the finger placement. So getting them to do the quasi-chromatic exercise, 1 finger per fret, or any kind of scale exercise, or if they're playing a melody or something like that, the main thing is they're going to try to do it all with 1 finger. And it's usually easier for them, but in the long run, it's not, because it's going to make everything harder. And you tell them that, but you might as well say that till you're red in the face, because a lot of times it doesn't click until they actually see it work for them and they make it a habit. The third thing that they generally don't do, or they have a hard time implementing in their playing, or they don't do this at all, is they don't use the pinky. Now, I understand largely why. Like, one of my biggest musical inspiration and favorite guitarist is Gary Moore, and he did use his pinky, but I've noticed he didn't use it anywhere near as much as the other 3 fingers on his hand. And there's reasons for that. I've noticed a lot of players, Dave Murray, my #1 influence from Iron Maiden, doesn't use his pinky that much. And his left hand is like greased lightning. Speedy Gonzalez could snort a mountain of cocaine, and he couldn't catch Dave Murray's left hand. But his pinky almost never touches the fretboard. And I've figured out, or at least I assume, that's because The pinky doesn't like to play well with others. It leaves the fretboard further away and has a hard time getting, like these three, they're fine. This one, you got to train it to not go so far. And it's also the weakest finger on your fret hand. So that's a lot of the reason why students don't use it. I'll see them, they'll be up here at the 15th fret, and they'll do this, and they'll use the ring finger instead of the pinky to go here. And it's not unacceptable, because that works just fine. But, and it depends on, sometimes I use that finger because it's a stronger finger, if I need to add vibrato or whatever. But they'll usually complain that it hurts when they use the pinky, or it gets tired quickly, and it's because it's the weakest finger on your hand, and it's always and always will be the biggest pain in the ass on your fret hand, because it's just the way it is. No matter how much you use it or how much you strengthen it, it'll always be that way. So it's something I really have to get on them about. Even when I write out the fingerings underneath, whether I use the number 4 for this finger or put a P on there for pinky, they almost never use it anyway. So it's very difficult to get them to implement that, regardless of how much you stress that its importance. But it is important for them to use it. It's on your hand, you might as well use it, because there's plenty of things that are made easier by doing so. For instance, playing this G chord with all 4 fingers, you can't do it without the pinky. You can do this one, that's only the 3-finger chord, or some people fret their G chord like this. But if you want that voicing, you have to use the pinky. So those are some guidelines that you can voice to your students. The 4th thing that we're going to end with is remembering how to read and interpret tabs and chord charts, and remembering chords and basic things that they should have memorized long ago. So you're going to have somebody come in, and after 2 or 3 months, sometimes longer, names of chords that they learned in the first week of lessons, and they're going to, like, I'll tell them E minor. They're like, which one is that? And this is one of those aneurysm generating moments for me, because it's like, Jesus, man, you learned this on the first day, and you'll have to write the chord out for them again, and you'll have to tell them index finger, 2nd fret A string, middle finger, 2nd fret D string, and you play all 6 strings. They'll ask you how many strings they're supposed to pick. It's like, eh. But it's a common thing, C, D, G, F, A minor, A, D, D minor, all of the basic open chords. They have a hard, even though most people don't get too far past those basic chords, they have a really hard time remembering them. They might remember the shape, but if you tell them, say, play D minor, they're going to ask you which one it is. Even if they can actually remember how to fret it, they're not going to remember the name of the chord until you show it, until you show it to them. The other thing that they have trouble implementing is remembering songs. Memorizing everything, they don't have to memorize everything, but people want to learn songs mostly, and that seems to be in this list of things that students have trouble remembering and or implementing, is just working on something enough where they memorize it, where they don't have to rely on the page that you write out for them or the sheet music they bring in or whatever it is. Seems to be a very difficult thing for them to work on it enough to where they just get it down to where they don't have to guess and they know it inside and out. So the 5 things are alternate picking, finger placement, not using the pinky hardly ever, or being made or forced to, or and remembering the names of chords, and understanding and interpreting tabs, and the whole memorization thing when it comes to riffs and parts and songs and any kind of piece of music they're working on. So hope these tips have helped you understand these a little bit better. Again, if anybody has any suggestions, or you've found ways to make this easier for students to implement, understand, and retain, please put some comments below. I'd love to hear them. I'm always looking at ways to become a better teacher, and new ideas and techniques and applications of all these concepts, and you should be too. So thanks a lot for tuning in. That's all for today. Hit the subscribe button, click the bell. We'll see you on the next time out. Peace.